take the last space available. Just let me also use a very brief part of it to thank Rabbi Robertson, Wolbowski, and everybody who contributed to this wonderful opportunity for us to have you here. Having you here is a great opportunity and a blessing for our community. Thank you very much for being here. I wanted just to take up from also my good friend Nathan's question and something you said. You talked about Chutz La'aretz, our Jews of the diaspora, being as one of the Abba Banim. And you talked about the importance of education in our communities and of love for Israel in our communities, and of the fact that we are living through a wondrous moment in history when something unprecedented is alive and close to us. In this context, and I'm talking to you not only as what we know you're as a great thinker, but also as a person who's been head of one of the most important Jewish communities in the diaspora for so long. What is, if there is, a role, a place for this fourth son in the context of the existence of this wonderful thing that is the state of Israel? Let me explain. We are here in Florence. Jews of Florence and of Tuscany have been proudly Zionist from the very beginning of Zionism in Europe. And our love for Israel is strong and steadfast. Our work in education is not as strong as steadfast. Sometimes, as now with Wolbowski and our chief rabbi Amadeo, we have wonderful educators. When we do have wonderful educators, we manage to give Jewish values to our kids, and these values include love for Israel. And what happens usually is that our best children make Aliyah and go to Israel. And this happens, I believe, in most communities around the world. We teach love and we teach a meaning and values which bring our children, usually in this context, not to want to live here anymore. This is natural, possibly, but is there a role for communities Chutz La'aretz, or are we destined just to become museums and a memento of an important history that is no more? Thank you.
Judaism was probably the first statement in civilization of a global phenomenon. Before Judaism, gods were gods of specific places. Ra was the supreme deity of Egypt, Chemosh of Moab, Baal of Canaan. Along comes the God of Abraham, who is the God of everywhere. And the result is, for the first time in history, global consciousness is born. When Moshe Rabbeinu, at the beginning of the Pesach story, confronts Pharaoh and says, God says, let my people go that they may serve me, Pharaoh says, who is this God? I don't know this God. What does that mean? It doesn't mean what we think it means, that Pharaoh never heard of the Jewish God. What it means is, Moses, you're in Egypt now, and here I'm in charge. Here my God rules, because gods were territorial. Along comes Hashem, and that is what Moses means when he says at the end of his life, did this ever happen? Did it ever happen before in history that God rescued one people from the midst of another people? If I can translate that sentence into 21st century language, this was the first international intervention in defense of human rights. And the second one did not happen until NATO's intervention in Kosovo in 1999. That was the second one. So Jews are citizens of Israel, but we're citizens of the world. And Judaism is not one simple set of truths it is a field of tensions between exile and homecoming, between priest and prophet, between individual and community, between timelessness and time. And so Jews have, and we know that our home is in Israel. In Israel, the land, the landscape is a Jewish landscape. The language is a Jewish language. The calendar is a Jewish calendar. You're okay in Italy, but you try sleeping in a sukkah, on sukkahs in England. I mean, forget it, try, when they make Havdalah up in Scotland, in the summer, all the Chagim were made for Israel. You feel in Galut what it is to be away from home. The Jewish people is a circumference whose center is Israel. But through many centuries, we were elsewhere and made great contributions elsewhere. Most obviously in Bavel, in Babylon, in the days of Ezekiel and the first exile, in the days of Rav and Shmuel, and the second exile, the exile that produced the Babylonian Talmud. Yes, Hashem wants us all to return, but don't forget, not only have we always been global, I think to myself in the 12th century, in the Cairo Geniza, they found this extraordinary treasury of Jewish manuscripts that, that have been, instead of being thrown away, you put them in a Geniza. And of course, what emerges, for instance, we knew this already in any case, is a lot of letters from Maimonides. Maimonides is living in the 12th century. He is conducting an international correspondence with Yosef ibn Aknin in Baghdad, with Rabbi Yonasan HaKohen of Lunel in France. He's covering the globe. People are writing to him, and he is writing back in the 12th century, etc. Jews, the master of my college in Cambridge, who wasn't Jewish, Joseph Needham, was the world's expert. He wrote the classic books on the science and civilization of China. I learned from him that it was Jews. China invented most things before the West. They invented ceramics before the West, printing before the West, gunpowder before everything, cotton mills before the West. The world's greatest expert on China told me it was Jews who brought Chinese inventions to Europe because there were traders on the Silk Road. So, yes, our home is Israel. But as Ezekiel told the Jews in Babylon, in the name of God, I will be for you a mikdash ma'at. You will have a little sanctuary, and I will be with you wherever you are, wherever you are scattered. And it was Jeremiah who wrote a letter to the exiles in Babylon, saying, settle, build houses, get married, have children, v'dirshu et shlom ha'ir, and seek the peace and welfare of the city where I send you, because in its peace and prosperity, you will find peace and prosperity. The first statement in history of what it is to be a creative minority. So yes, there is some great thing that you can do here in Florence or anywhere else in the world. Number one, we can light a little flame of Judaism that will light up a very dark world, not only for us, but for those who know us, and see how our values are peace, justice, compassion, charity. We are people who want to give to the world more than we want to take from the world. That is important. Secondly, just as any Jew is Kvod HaShagrir Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God's ambassador, so in this difficult age, we have to be Israel's ambassador. And to fight for it, especially when it's hard. We know that the best critics of Israel live in Israel. Most of them write for Haaretz, but never mind. They live in Israel. Israel is not short of critics. Why? And this goes back to Tanakh. I want you to think about Tanakh. Tanakh is the only national literature ever produced in which all the good things that happen we attribute to God, and all the bad things that happen we attribute to ourselves. The exact reverse of any other national literature. So we know the art of self-criticism. So we can light a flame of Jewish life wherever we are. Secondly, we can be ambassadors for God, for the Jewish people, and for Israel. And thirdly, because every time and place has some mitzvah in it that we just don't know what it is. Italy was the country that first allowed Jews to enter the intellectual world of the larger culture. So Italian Jewry was way ahead of all other juries. And if you come to more modern times, a former chief rabbi of Florence, Umberto Cassuto, who made Aliyah and became a professor of Bible at the Hebrew University and produced one of the most powerful expositions of Torah that I know of in the 20th century. And you can't read Umberto Cassuto without knowing he was an Italian Jew. But all his Torah is real, Mehar Sinai. It comes from Mount Sinai via Florence. So here we are. Hashem needs us in all sorts of places in the world. And in a global age, when Hashem has invented all these technologies, smartphones, we know his human agent was Steve Jobs. We know this. And Steve was a category all of his own. But why did smartphones get invented? Because Jews want to talk to one another all across the world. It's good to talk. This is the Jewish thing. So Hashem has given us ways of abolishing distance. And all of this global technology, let us take. Let us use that technology to connect with Jews of Israel. Let us share all the great things you do here in Florence with all the Jews in Israel, a two-way traffic of creativity. And somehow or other, here or there, if we can stay together and contribute to one another, let God's blessings flow through us to the world. Laila Tov.
Rabbi Sachs, thank you so very much for giving us of your time. We really appreciate it. Have a good evening.